Hello and welcome back to the Two Fairs Boxing Show, episode 13. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, listening on Spotify, appreciate you all for tuning in. It's been another good weekend of boxing. Definitely looking forward to this weekend's undisputed super welterweight clash between Jermerll Charlo and Brian CHARLO-CASTANO. Fight that was very easily made. It was quite surprising to a lot of people. Finally going to have another undisputed champion. It's always a great feat for any fighter to go on to that length and achieve that. What an accolade that is on the line for these fighters this weekend. And before we obviously come on to that, we're going to touch on the fights that happened over the weekend, as well as just a couple of other news bits that has happened. I think it's probably best to start with Gilberto Ramirez. His fourth round knockout victory over Sullivan Barrera was a bit of a surprise to me. I didn't expect him to deal with Barrera so quickly, I suppose. I think there was always a puncher's chance of defeating Barrera. But Barrera is this kind of, slick veteran that has been around in the sport for so long, and you never really have seen him kind of dealt with. I can't even remember the last time he was stopped. When was the last time that he was stopped? Because I remember he fought Jesse Hart. That was a brilliant fight. He fought Bivol, but that was a sort of TKO at the very end. This was a very clear and concise win for Gilberto Ramirez. One that honestly we haven't really seen, and it's quite exciting to see him get a win like that. I know that he's somewhat struggled to get the fights that he wanted, especially in the super middleweight division when he was WBO world champion. Never really had a memorable fight there. I think the biggest fights that he had were the two against Jesse Hart, which I very clearly remember Bob Arum saying that, if you need to see a rematch between Gilberto Ramirez and Jesse Hart, you clearly don't know boxing. And then something like 8 months later, he made the rematch. It was. It's interesting to see Gilberto Ramirez finally kind of get his turn of the limelight on DAZN. And now with Golden Boy moving forward, I'd imagine that they're going to try and get him some big fights lined up. I'd imagine that he goes down the WBO route. So, there's Lyndon Arthur, who's kind of, I believe, at the number one spot right now. Joe Smith Jr. holding the belts. It's a tough route, really. Not really too sure where he'll go. I think ideally, with the inactivity that he has faced and only, having the kind of two fights since 2019, maybe you just want to see him in one more. I think him against Callum Smith makes a lot of sense. Two former 168-pound world champions, both moving up to the light heavyweight division. I know Ramirez has obviously been there for a while, but I think it's just a good fight. I mean, Ramirez with the undefeated record, there was talk of them facing at 168 pounds. Callum Smith needs a kind of big win after his loss to Canelo Alvarez. It's like a comeback fight for him, a make or break. And I think it's a credible opponent as well for Ramirez. If Ramirez beats Callum Smith, then you kind of think, he 100% deserves to have a shot at a world title at 175 pounds. So that's the fight that ideally I'd like to see him take on next. Obviously, we fight in the same weekend as Lyndon Arthur. I think with Lyndon Arthur being WBO number one, they'll probably look at that as a good opportunity to get Ramirez into a world title contention shot. But I think as a fan, Gilberto Ramirez versus Callum Smith makes a lot more sense. But business-wise, I think they'll try and get to grips with Lyndon Arthur. Or just bide their time. Not too sure at all. But what a brilliant shot from Gilberto Ramirez, like perfectly placed body shot. And as I was saying, a veteran of the sport in Sullivan Barrera just seemed to crumble as soon as the body shots landed. Really was a kind of a statement really made by Gilberto Ramirez. Very tentative opening, but just all of a sudden exploded as soon as Ramirez landed those shots. And yeah, great win for Ramirez. Very, actually, for once, excited to see what is next for him, and how he moves forward in the 175 pound region. In the co-main event, we obviously had Jojo Diaz against Javier Fortuna, a unanimous decision victory for Jojo Diaz. Pretty much the kind of result that we expected. It was a very entertaining fight. Diaz just that little bit sharper, but so many shots were thrown, and Javier Fortuna really forcing the action at the start of the fight. I think in the later rounds, in the last few rounds especially, you could see that Diaz was really up in the ante and really sticking it to Fortuna. Even though he suffered the cut, didn't seem to faze him too much. He just kept a high guard when he was taking a barrage of punches from Fortuna, but nothing was really getting in, and I think that's why the scoring kind of reflects that kind of wide decision, I want to say. It wasn't like a shutout, don't get me wrong. I still think it was a close fight, but I think there's just a lot of rounds that you could have given to Diaz, and I think the right winner was chosen. You could definitely sense that Fortuna was kind of feeling it in the latter stage of the fight. So yeah, I think you take all that into consideration. I think Diaz was the right winner, and he moves on now fighting at the 135 pound division. Yeah, I think Haney or Garcia next. Whichever one really makes sense. I think it's time to put a little bit of respect on Jojo Diaz's name. Don't really feel like he got the credit he deserved after beating Tevin Farmer. I know Tevin Farmer looked drained as anything in that fight. Was obviously very clearly, I believe from my analysis, struggling to make the 130 pound limit. And now Diaz has got another reputable win against Fortuna. Those two wins look really good on his resume, and I think even after fucking the weight against Rakhimov, he's got a very successful 2021 year ahead. I think even to get the draw, I think it was impressive. If he was making those weight cuts, quite dangerous they can be at times. So yeah, I think, it's got to be even Devin Haney or Ryan Garcia, and it's like I said, I think whatever he really wants to do, if he feels that he can make a lot more money by fighting Ryan Garcia, which is probably the way that I would see it. Garcia a bit more of a global star in the making. Haney, not too sure, other than the world title, what he brings to the table. Money-wise, I think you have to say the financial decision lies with Ryan Garcia. So just depends what he wants. And I think, it's like I said, I think it's time to give him a bit of respect, and let him do what he wants. If he wants to fight for a world title, if he wants to fight for money, let him do it. Let him pick one of those and give the decision to him. It obviously puts him into that mix of all those other 4 Americans that are in the lightweight / super lightweight division. And yeah, just looking forward to Jojo Diaz. Really, really great guy. Fun fighter. Gives incredible breakdowns of fights. If you ever go and watch some of his sort of punditry work or just interviews of him, can always give you a really good insight to what you can expect from fights. So I've always loved that from him. And yeah, looking forward to seeing what is next for Jojo Diaz. We're moving on to the Saturday night, where we obviously saw Lyndon Arthur with a knockout victory over David Faraci. TKO in the 9th round. I think it was kind of the result that we expected. I think if it went the distance, a lot of people would have been very disappointed in Lyndon Arthur. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but obviously I think it's the kind of opponent that we expected him to kind of get out of there. And I think, yeah, timing was kind of right. I said that kind of in the later rounds that Arthur would eventually get to him. And I think that did definitely happen. It went on a little later, obviously, than some people expected. I think a lot of people did think that it would end a lot sooner. Especially when you saw the style of Faraci, that typical European or Italian style, looked a little bit clumsy at times. But the right hand from Lyndon Arthur, I have to admit, in the 5th round was incredible. Lands 2 sort of short right hands, which dropped Faraci, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they were absolutely fantastic. And then right in the 9th round, you get some very clever combinations from Lyndon Arthur to close the show. Not much, really too much more to say on this fight. I think it's like I was saying, it was the result that everybody expected. I don't think many people were really giving Faraci a chance to win that fight, and I think that's a fair statement. Lyndon Arthur, a lot on the line, expected to come through this easily, and looks toward that WBO world title shot at some point. However, we have seen that Frank is very keen to make Lyndon Arthur versus Anthony Yarde 2, the rematch. So whether that comes next or not, I know that Lyndon Arthur's team don't want that fight. Why would they? It just doesn't make any sense at the moment. I think, yeah, we can kind of look forward for Lyndon Arthur to, move towards that world title shot. Not too sure if he's ready for a world title shot against someone like Joe Smith Jr. just yet. But who knows? I mean, it depends what's really on the table for him. Maybe we'll have to see Anthony Yarde next. That seems to be the fight that Frank wants to make, so we have to presume that that's what we're going to get. So we can see that later on this year. But I just don't know. I don't know. Anthony Yarde, now with a new trainer, whether that brings a lot more elements to his game. I think just the jab of Lyndon Arthur was so key in the first fight that I don't know if Yarde can really make the changes to overcome that. Maybe he can, and it'll definitely be interesting to find out. But in terms of how excited am I to see that rematch, I have to say that the excitement is very little. Would much rather see either guy go both their own way. Lyndon Arthur could face Callum Johnson. I think that's a perfect fight for him, really. And yeah, Anthony Yarde, there's still a couple of domestic options open to him, as well as the Buatsi fight. Like, don't get me wrong, I know that Anthony Yarde's taken a couple of losses now, and Buatsi has obviously got that fight with Bolotniks coming up. But it's time to start pitting these guys against each other, and I think Anthony Yarde really needs to rebuild. He hasn't quite rebuilt just as well as we thought he would since the Kovalev loss, and I think there's a lot more still to be seen from Anthony Yarde, and just get him for that fight with that new trainer. So let's see how he gels now with the new trainer, and then maybe look towards making the rematch. But yeah, we'll have that to look forward to. Devin Haney. We'll move on to a couple of bits of news now. Obviously mentioned Devin Haney earlier on in this episode, but Devin Haney now a free agent. Interesting decision. I think a lot of free agent talk has been mentioned in the last sort of past months, sorry. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit surprised. I feel like he was in a good position with DAZN and Eddie Hearn and Matchroom. But yeah, maybe they just weren't getting the fights made for him. I think Jorge Linares was the perfect fight for him at the right time. I think, that Ryan Garcia fight was probably close to being made at some point next. Now I don't know. Now I don't know where Haney goes. Does he go and fight Gervonta Davis? Whether that's at 135 or 140 pounds, makes that fight maybe a little bit easier to make. He could wait until Teofimo Lopez comes through Cambosos. It's just a bit of a confusing situation. I don't know. I'm sure Haney knows what he's doing, and he is kind of tipped as a superstar of the future. Has good people around him like the Mayweathers and obviously his father. I don't know. I presume that Devin Haney knows what he's doing, but he's just very young. It is a risky decision to become a free agent at that kind of time of his career, but wish him all the best. Sometimes it works out very well, sometimes not so well. So we'll just have to wait and see, and hopefully that does become a sort of, a story to tell, a story to look back on at one stage of his career. Moving forward, we've got Tim Tszyu, who was in a fight actually last week, but it was meant to be against Michael Zarafa, and then Zarafa, I think, had COVID. Not too sure. Then fought Steve Spark, knocked out Steve Spark. Expected result was a last minute replacement. Wasn't really a fight that we were going to touch on. So the news that we were looking to touch on is that he's obviously looking for an opponent in September. One of the opponents mentioned is Liam Smith, Britain's Liam Smith. And I think I've been saying this for the last few fights that I'd love to see Tszyu against Liam Smith. I think both highly rated in the WBO. Makes a lot of sense with Liam Smith being that name, a former world champion. Yeah, I think I'd like to see that fight. I think that's the most likely scenario next for Tszyu. Because other than fighting for the world title, which has been contested this weekend between Charlo and Castano, I don't know. I don't know what else could really be next. But really like that fight. Really like that it was mentioned, and I hope that goes forward. I think Tszyu probably nicks it, just being the younger, fresher fighter. Liam Smith just looked a little bit limited in his last few fights now. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that fight does go ahead. I think they're looking at a September date for that. So yeah, very much looking forward to it. The big news, obviously, Fury Wilder 3 was postponed after there was a COVID outbreak in Tyson Fury's camp. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of crap being mentioned. Bob Arum saying that both fighters been double vaccinated and that, you know, all fighters need to take care so that fights don't get cancelled. Bit of a weird one, really. They're now looking at October. Really want to get that fight out of the way so that then we can obviously move forward with AJ Fury or just AJ Wilder, or, you know, Usyk Wilder or Usyk Fury, we don't know. There's so many variables, really, that goes into making that undisputed fight that we were talking about a year ago. Yeah, it is a bit of a shitter. I think people are just looking forward more to that just getting out of the way. A lot of people actually that I have spoken to considered that, you know, Wilder kind of wins, and wins quite easily, just because he's always got that power to kind of hold him in good stead. But I think how conclusive the second fight was in Tyson Fury's favour, you really do have to make Fury the favourite. And yeah, just hopefully we get that sorted as soon as possible. I know Shelley Finkel's come out and said that they're already looking at October and everything should go through smoothly. Unlike, obviously, Lopez Kambosos, it seems that there's always been a riddle of problems trying to make that fight and stage it and get it just done and over the line. Yeah, hopefully it's nothing like we've really seen with that fight, and hopefully it just gets sorted as soon as possible. Seb Eubank tragically passed away in the last few days. Chris Eubank's son obviously leaves behind his 1-month-old kid, wife, and obviously countless friends and family. Drowned in the sea in Dubai, I believe. It's like I said, tragic, really. I don't think anyone could have really imagined, you know, a 30-year-old passing away. Obviously a very fit guy, so he's an athlete. Just shocking, I think. I think the whole boxing world, boxing Twitter, Facebook, you know, everyone's kind of come together to pass on their condolences, and I think that's exactly what we're going to do here. You know, and there's always been a great character from what I have seen of him. Just a real shame for the Eubank family to kind of go through that at this stage, and yeah, obviously passing on our thoughts to the Eubank family and all the friends and family. Moving on. David Morel was ordered to face John Ryder. Obviously picked up the WBA regular title, and John Ryder highly ranked with the WBA. Yeah, I think that's the fight that Ryder's been calling for, and I think that's the fight that he deserves to get. Morel's looked very impressive in his last few fights, and just, you know, is a very entertaining fighter. We kind of wanted John Ryder to get a big fight since the loss to Callum Smith, where a lot of people didn't really feel like it was warranted. So yeah, looking forward to seeing that fight. I don't know how long. I would imagine that they get sort of 30 days to make an agreement, make a deal for that fight, and for it to go ahead. I can imagine that it will take place on DAZN. And yeah, it should be interesting. Morel, very sort of limited with experience in the professional game, but a very talented amateur. John Ryder has just looked incredible at £168, to be honest, compared to his sort of domestic level run at middleweight. Just looks completely rejuvenated at £168. And I think he'll give Morel a real tough challenge. I think it's definitely his biggest test on paper. And whether John Ryder has enough in his game to upset the apple cart, I'd imagine, is kind of the way that people will look at it. Morel's just dealt with every occasion very easily so far. Whether John Ryder has that in his basket to upset the apple cart and take home the title will be interesting. But just very excited to see that opportunity come up for John Ryder, and looking forward to hopefully, well, if that fight goes ahead, we'll have to wait and see. Yeah, it will be interesting. Very much looking forward to it. Need to stop saying that, but we'll carry on. Finally, this is what I've been trying to gear myself up to. I just want to talk about this fight. Jermerll Charlo versus Brian Castano. Undisputed super welterweight crown on the line. Fantastic fight. A lot of people not really giving the credit that Castano deserves, aren't really giving him too much of a shout. Understand that you would make Jermerll Charlo as the more experienced fighter, been around the game for a while now, 31 years of age. Definitely understand making him the favourite. Castano, the fairly news champion. Yeah, and I expect that is going to be the way that it'll go. But Jermerll Charlo has just looked so good in his last few fights. I think Jason Rosario, Jason Rosario is kind of one of them that had that big win over J-Rock, and just never really capitalised from there for a free belt unification against Jermerll Charlo. And it was basically dominated by Jermerll Charlo. I think it just looks so impressive. And the Tony Harrison rematch as well, just ever since that loss to Tony Harrison, he's just looked really good, reclaiming the world title that he lost, and then unifying. And I think he's just going to carry on the success that he's having. I think he's going to have to come through some tricky moments. I think it'll be a fun fight to watch, but I just think Castano just hasn't got that quite enough to really just nick it from Jermerll Charlo. I expect it'll be very close on the cards. Jermerll Charlo is probably going to have to try and knock down Castano to really secure a victory. Just going to have to force Castano back onto the back foot. And I think that's just the only way that you're going to have to... That's why I think it would just be a complete firefight really between the two, because Castano won't really want to give in. And yeah, I think you can see a very entertaining fight. Castano kind of forcing back Charlo at times, but I think Castano just won't have quite enough experience. And I think it was really going to test his heart in this fight as well. But like I said, very much looking forward to it. I think you can see that Charlo points is the favourable betting pick, the favourable prediction. But yeah, he's just looked so good recently, and I think he's just going to carry it on. And I don't think it will be that kind of breakout fight, but I think he'll go on and claim the undisputed crown by decision, and the world is his oyster from there. Be the top man of the division, even though I feel like he is already there. But it secures it, makes it concrete, and he could go anywhere from there. Could go up and challenge Gennady Golovkin at middleweight. Plenty of other fights at middleweight as well. Or he could just continue at 154 pounds and completely dominate the division. Just looking forward to it, and I think that's the way that this weekend's fight is going to go. And yeah, just looking forward to that one. Really looking forward to it. And yeah, that is everything. Always going to try and disappear as quick as I can, just in case I keep on rambling about loads of fights. But yeah, hope you guys have enjoyed, whether you're watching or listening. Always appreciate the support. If you're on YouTube, please be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe. And thank you as always, for tuning in. And I will see you next week, where we'll be reviewing, obviously, the fights over the weekend and looking ahead to whatever is next week. So I believe it's Joyce Takam next weekend. So, yeah, that'll be good. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.